everybody, I'm Amanda Hosenfeld.
And I'm Michelle Zahowski.
Welcome to Compliance Live. If this looks weird, if you're watching on our YouTube channel, it's because our camera is there.
But our person's going to be there.
But our people are there. So we are really excited about this week's show. We're going to be interviewing, that is a word that I just said correctly. We're going to interview Erin Nicodemus from Compliance Week. Just before we get started, as always, Mark from Accounting would like everybody to know that this podcast is sponsored by Compliance Line. So thank you to Compliance Line for this space to offer you valuable compliance and ethics related content. Mark is on vacation.
Yeah, so he can't stop by and say hi. We've asked him several times.
We have asked him to come by and at least do like a spot. And you know what? Every time he does this. He goes, no.
That's correct.
No.
One day, we'll get him in here.
Also, if you haven't already, which I'm sure you all have, please go out and follow us on all of our social media. We are on Twitter at Compliance Live, on Facebook and Instagram at Compliance Line, but we are most active on our LinkedIn profile under our company page, Compliance Line. So there you're going to find videos and tips and tricks, and sometimes we post bloopers from the show. I anticipate posting a lot of those.
So there's useful information, and sometimes you also get a laugh.
Yeah, and we bleep out all of the curse words,
Yep.
so that's good. All right, well, thanks as always for joining in, and please enjoy the show with Erin Nicodemus. Erin, welcome. Thanks for taking the time and joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in writing for Compliance Week?
Sure. So I'm a longtime journalist, and I worked for a lot of daily newspapers in Massachusetts and for a year in South Africa. So I've had a lot of experience as a journalist. About 2 years ago, I started working for Bloomberg News, which I was covering tax and employment law and a couple of other things. And they decided they wanted to take my position from Boston and move it to Sacramento. And I said I didn't know.
Yeah, that's not like across state lines. That's across all of the state's lines.
It's a little farther than going to Providence. Yeah, it's not exactly an easy commute. So I left Bloomberg and I found a job with Compliance Week, which I started earlier this year. And it's been a sort of a whirlwind because, first month, it's kind of a normal start, right? Second month, coronavirus. And I've written over 100 coronavirus stories since March. Wow. And it's just like, I feel like at times it's all I write about because it is.
So you must be an expert then.
It does feel like.
Can we talk to you, Dr. Fauci?
I know a lot about compliance and coronavirus, but very, 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 very small pockets there, And so it's been a lot of fun learning about compliance, but also about sort of who the people are in the field and what motivates them. That's been fun too.
So just to go off topic for a second, what kind of journalism did you do in South Africa? That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, so I worked for the Mail and Guardian. It's a weekly sort of left-leaning political newspaper that took on the establishment back during apartheid. And then since South Africa transitioned to an all-race government, it is still sort of poking its finger at the government and at problems and corruption. And I wrote about healthcare and AIDS. And at the time, the health minister was saying that AIDS could not be cured by Western medicine and that Western medicine was a poison, which in a way it is. It's sort of like chemotherapy.
Right, an intentional poisoning, right.
But it has a purpose. Anyway, she was trying to convince people to use traditional medicines that weren't effective, and people were dying as a result. And so I spent a lot of my time basically writing what the experts were saying and what the health minister was saying and what the government was not doing to help people who had AIDS at that time. And so it was a really interesting time. I met my wife there, and we've been married for It'll be 20 years in October.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. That's exciting.
Thanks,
I've been married for only 2, and that seems like a lot.
That's a long time.
Yeah, 20 years. There's a lot of gray hairs in this beard from 20 years of marriage.
That feels like that kind of journalism in that area of the world could be kind of dangerous. Did it feel dangerous at the time, or you're like, I'm a rebel, right? I'm this rule breaker journalist?
Yeah. At the time, I was 29, and I was really looking for an adventure, and I found one. South Africa can be a very dangerous place if you are in the wrong places at the wrong time. And as a journalist, I was putting myself in those places on a regular basis. So at the end, I'd been there for a year. I really decided I'd seen a lot of violence, and I felt like I'd had some close calls, and I just felt I didn't want to take any more risks. I'd been a crime victim a couple of times, never anything physical, but it was scary,
Yeah.
Windows smashed when your car's on the side of the road, and I had a farmer shoot warning shots at us one time, and there was just a lot of stuff like that just sort of built up, and you just wondered, am I going to be this lucky today as I was yesterday? And after a year, I just decided that was enough.
Yeah. You're much safer in the United States currently.
Well, I do go back to South Africa like every 2 or 3 years to visit my wife's family, but we know what to do to stay safe there. We know where to go and how to behave.
So it sounds like a lot of your work it has been kind of tangentially compliance focused. I know, like, as a little girl, I didn't grow up and say, you know what I want to do when I grow up? Compliance. And it's just kind of something that we fall into. Like, what interests you with that? And how is your path kind of always taking you back to that compliance sphere?
Yeah, I've done a lot of explaining to my friends and former colleagues, and what is compliance? They don't know what it is, but once I say to them, basically it's about understanding what the rules are and following them, and it's about making people behave ethically in the workplace. Those are things that resonate with people, and they understand, oh, okay, that's what it's about. It's not so complicated, actually. If you get down to the, how to interpret a particular regulation, yes, it can be complicated. But in general, it's pretty straightforward, do the right thing, follow the rules, and encourage others to do the same. So in that case, a lot of journalism, from my perspective, is sort of showing people what's going on so that they can make decisions for themselves. And I think being a compliance reporter, you're showing people what they need to do to follow a rule correctly or to behave ethically. And so there's a lot of parallels between what I have done in the past and what I'm doing now.
I think that's so appropriate the way you explain that, because I teach our new hires, and when I got here to compliance line, it was I had kind of the same question, like, okay, you're a compliance company, but what does that really mean? And so as I've learned more about compliance and we train our new hires, the first day we start with compliance just means the rules. And if you break them, you are out of compliance. And that, I think, to your point, is really easy for them to understand.
I've also had to get past sort of compliance as being the department of no. There's some people who knew what compliance is. And so I had to be like, well, it's actually just trying to redirect you, or put you back on the right path. There's different ways to look at everything.
Michelle and I just had that conversation earlier. She was like, Amanda, you're always saying no. And I'm like, because I'm being compliant.
Yeah.
It was literally a conversation we had before we started recording.
Exactly. Yes, actually.
I have a question for you about your kind of favorite things about compliance to write about. So we took a look through your articles, and what really The reason why I reached out, or I had Michelle, actually, she's our pre-production person, reach out to you is because I read your article on the fraud and corruption in the NRA. But when we really looked at, you've just got such a diverse amount of topics in the compliance space. What's your favorite kind of topic? Michelle called it, what's your favorite sandbox to play in when it comes to compliance?
Yeah. I haven't really picked one per se, but I enjoy getting down and trying to figure out what it is that makes this particular thing tick. And I've also really enjoyed speaking with compliance people about how they go about their jobs and how they figure out what's ethical behavior, what's proper behavior, and what isn't. There's a lot of rules and regulations that I thought I was going to have as much trouble with as I did with, say, tax law when I wrote about tax law for Bloomberg. It's just
like
complicated.
saying, by the way.
Yeah. And
is that really? Does it really?
Yeah, like my heart just started beating a little bit faster when you started talking about that.
Sometimes tax law is just complicated because it can be, and there's no other. But with compliance, I've always felt that there is sort of an end game to every one of the rules that you're in or that you're trying to explain. And so trying to get at what it is trying to accomplish, to me, is the fun part of compliance, of writing about compliance, because the rule is the rule and it may have little permutations or whatever, but they're trying to get somewhere. And that's where the interesting part is for me. And you can pick apart, well, why are they trying to get there? And do you agree with them trying to get to that point? That's the thinking about compliance that I have enjoyed reporting on once you get past the written rule or order that you're trying to figure out.
So you wrote a couple of articles that are, as to your point earlier, shockingly about COVID and kind of the compliance challenges that come with that. What are the
So one of them was kind of in regards to the data security piece with all these people working remotely in regard, because of the pandemic. A lot of companies have this kind of increased risk with their data security. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So data security was something that I think a lot of companies have struggled with since the coronavirus hit and they've had to go to remote workplaces. So a lot of companies sort of pushed a whole bunch of employees out into remote workplaces out of necessity and not because they wanted to. And then they started to realize that there are all these other cybersecurity issues that are going to come up as a result of having everyone working remotely. Now, a lot of companies, the biggest problem was they were giving laptops and access to people who'd never had it before. So, if the executives had access, they could work from home or whatever, that's fine. But some of the lower paid and less senior employees were given laptops and just sort of go to it. And I think that's where a lot of companies struggled because they found out that people were using laptops on unsecured Wi-Fi in the coffee house. And you think, hook up to Wi-Fi, it's like talking on the phone, right? No, it actually isn't. Other people can hop onto that signal and can be tracing or tracking what you're doing on that unsecured network. And that's a real problem. If they're tracing your keystrokes, you're basically giving them access to your system because you're in this unsecured place. Another problem that...
Now, can you have, sorry, quick side note, can you have I actually don't know the answer to this, so maybe you do. Can you have like a secure laptop on an unsecure connection?
Yes, because if your laptop is encrypted, or if you're entering into a network where you need to get where your connection is encrypted, then it blocks whoever's trying to get. They can't. All they see is the encryption. They can't see. But if it's not encrypted, that's where the problem comes in.
Well, and it takes work to get to to get those encrypted machines and stuff, and because even when, we hire someone new and they have to have a laptop, it still takes time to kind of make sure that they have the machine, and then they have to do all of the things to it, like the IT stuff. to make it
That was
secure.
very specific,
I know,
all the
very
IT stuff.
super technical.
Yeah, and I don't know much about the IT stuff either, but I can tell you that you know, most of the problems that companies were dealing with from a compliance perspective had to do with employees, and employees either misusing the equipment or accessing through unsecured networks or falling for spoofing or phishing, where they would give away you know, either money or codes to bad actors. So I mean, training is really what companies need to do to get their employees up to speed when they're working from home.
Okay, I love it when people talk training to me, because
yeah,
training is, yeah, it is. It actually is my love language. So I was going to ask you, we have all taken that compliance training in January. Your compliance training is coming up in January, Michelle. You're welcome. And that training on, you know, don't use an unsecured internet thing in the Starbucks. And how much do you think this situation is going to change those annual compliance trainings, you know, on the IT side or on really on any compliance side?
I think the biggest way it's going to change is that companies are going to spend a lot more time and energy monitoring their employees. This is something that has been very controversial. However, companies look at it as a way to protect themselves. If they see someone downloading a large amount of data, you know, can they press a button to say, we're going to stop that right now. We're going to find out whether that's legitimate or not. You know, can they, you know, in the financial services, you need to monitor employees for things like, you know, insider trading or stock manipulation. And so there's some industries that have monitored their employees for years, but they used to do it from the office. And they say, when you come into the office, they'd say, put your personal cell phone right over here in this basket. You can't use it, can't touch it until you leave, right? Now they're working from home. Now what do you do? Because obviously you can't take away their stuff. And so do you need to start tracking their personal cell phone? In some companies, the answer is yes.
So I feel like, I feel like some of this is, some of this can be very malicious. So, but I think a lot of it also is just from a lack of education or know-how from the employees. So do you think that it falls on the company to make sure that they're properly educating their employees on how they should be operating and using these laptops when they're not in the office, and, you know, best remote work practices, and how much of that falls onto the company as far as not just monitoring the employees, but kind of maybe taking that, like, yeah, educating them and taking that proactive step.
Yeah, I think educating them is the first thing that should happen, and the most important thing that needs to happen, because if you get the employees to buy in, you get them to think, okay, I'm helping to protect our important data, the things that make our company, you know, what it is, then I'm helping the company. I'm keeping the company from suffering financial losses or loss of business or what have you. By being a good employee, I'm helping the company succeed. And something that I think if you promote that with employees, you know, that's a way of saying this is how you can do good, as opposed to, you know, the this is bad, you're dumb if you do this, that kind of.
So you just flip that from like a glass half empty to a glass half full. Like, no,
yeah.
Because when it's kind of startling for me, because when you say, you know, be a good employee, I'm thinking, yeah, don't watch Netflix on your laptop. But what it's like, it also can be those nefarious things like, don't, you know, download company property and use it for insider trading. Like, that's not.
Or even so, like, a lot of people will use their business laptop as their personal machine too.
Yeah.
I mean, I know people that don't even have a computer because they have a business computer that they use for their personal stuff too. And I think there kind of needs to be a little bit more education around that division as well.
Say it again. Say there needs to be more training.
More training. Education.
Here's something that's happened in this remote work time that has been a surprise to companies, I think, and that is people are actually more productive working from home than companies ever dreamed they would be. I think so many upper management people were thinking, if I let people work from home, I'm going to see them for 15 minutes a day, and the rest of the time they're going to be out walking their dog or shopping or whatever. But they have not found that to be the case. In fact, employees working from home have been more productive since the pandemic hit than anyone expected. And
do you find that that's true for? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Do you, this is the part of these virtual things that I hate. Do you find that that's been true for you? Because I think in one of our pre-meetings that you said you hadn't even gone into the office, right, at Compliance Week.
Yeah, so the pandemic was announced on March 12th, which was my last day in the office. And what they said was, you know, we're not going to come in on Friday, and then on Monday we'll talk about what we're going to do. And it's August, and I have not seen the office. So I'm used to working remotely, though. I worked remotely at Bloomberg, so this wasn't a big change for me, but for the company, it was a big change. About a third of Compliance Week's business before the pandemic was live events, and
wow.
Those, of course, have disappeared. So now we're doing a lot of virtual events that have been fairly successful in that we're getting good numbers, but we're not spending money on hotels and travel and everything else. So it's sort of balancing out. It's not quite as good, but it's pretty good. But those are the kind of things we've just had to adjust to on the fly. It's like nobody is coming to an in-person event, folks. So we got to figure this out.
Yeah. Well, going back kind of to the data security piece, what are some steps that, aside from kind of education, that companies can take, other steps that they can take to kind of protect their data?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's two main types of people who are trying to get your data. There's bad actors, and we've talked about them. They're the hackers. And the IT department is the one that should be handling, you know, how to make firewalls and make your system resilient and all that stuff. That's not really in compliance's wheelhouse. But bad employees, that is in compliance's wheelhouse. And there's a number of steps that we can take. We've talked about training. That's the best one, trying to build up employees as sort of guardians of your data and your business's private information. But I think, you know, a couple of the other things you can do is say, okay, employees are great, but we're going to do a couple of things to make sure that they can't behave badly. We're going to limit their access to certain parts of our database, and that they need special permission from their manager or from someone in IT to access that information. If we're talking about lists of clients, if we're talking about intellectual property, that kind of thing. You don't want them to be in there unless they need to be, unless they have permission to be. So limit access to, you know, sensitive data. That's one thing. And then we talked about monitoring employees, and I'm not a big fan of it, but I do understand why companies would want to do it. And let's say, I think we talked about how if you're seeing a big download, or if you're monitoring your employees and you see a big download, you can stop it before it finishes, because you know that's probably not kosher. That's probably not a good thing, and we should stop that now. So those are a couple of things that companies can do.
So as people start returning to the workplace, or cross your fingers, we start returning to the workplace, you wrote this other article called Navigating the Return of Employees to the Workplace, aptly named. Does that fall on the compliance department to make sure that's done safely?
It has. It's been, from interviews I've done, it's been sort of a mixed reaction and answer to that question. Small and mid-sized companies, compliance departments have been sort of roped in and said, listen, we need your help with some of this stuff because you have experience in speaking with employees about what they need to do, and this is something that we need your help with. Larger companies, the compliance departments have been sort of spared from dealing with what is mostly considered human resources function. But what's been happening with the smaller and mid-sized companies is that it's all hands on deck. Okay, we need everyone to take a role in bringing us back to work safely, and so sometimes they're getting assigned pieces of that return to work plan that they need to implement from their department.
What are some of those
Pieces.
Yeah, because I know we're a small-ish company, and we like, all right, who's in charge of the hand sanitizer and who's in charge of the bleach wipes?
Or but wiping down all the doorknobs this hour.
Right, but it feels bigger than that.
Yeah, I think, one of the big areas that compliance has been asked to step in is to evaluate entering the workplace protocols, trying to figure out, okay, do we want to test everyone's temperature? Do we want to make sure that they have, do we want them to line up? Do we want them to go through a giant machine? Do we want them to face a laptop screen that takes their temperature and measure, also looks at their face and then allows them to come in? So compliance has been tasked with trying to figure out what's the best way for our employees at our company to get to work safely. There's also, there's these questionnaires that sometimes compliance has been tasked with creating and sending out to employees to say, okay, how are you feeling today? Are you feeling sick? And you have to check, I'm not feeling sick, I'm okay, and I'm ready to come to work, and so you have to affirmatively say, I'm not sick, and you do that every day as a way of perhaps skipping the temperature checks. It's just another way of maybe saying, I'm ready to come to work.
Is that a way to kind of absolve the company of risk?
Well, it is part of that. I mean, there are waivers that some companies are asking employees to sign, but that has been met with a lot of blowback because employees are saying, wait a minute, you want me to sign my rights away so that if I get sick, I can't sue? Is that what you're saying? And then the company says, no, we don't, yeah, that's what we want. But no, that's not what we want. What's happening is they're trying to find a balance between bringing people back to work safely and also protecting the company from liability. And it is every company is struggling with that. And it's, I don't think anyone has necessarily found the answer.
When we reach out to our HR company and it's, what should we do in this situation or this situation? A lot of times the answer that we get back is, we're just figuring it out and you're probably doing the right thing, but we don't really have a precedent for it. Do you find that that's true?
From what I've understood, the best defense against any argument, against a lawsuit or against an employee saying you did the wrong thing without filing a law, is did you follow the steps and the protocols that have been laid out by your local, state, and federal government? So if you're saying, I looked at all these regulations, I as the company, and I followed them, and I can prove it, I have paperwork, I have, here's all the masks I bought, here's all the sanitizer that's at everyone's desks, here's what I did to try and make sure that people didn't get sick in the workplace. If you can show you had a plan and that you implemented it, that is the best defense. And, but who knows what a judge is going to say in 6 months from now, because we are dealing with this now and it's just going to look different by the time it gets to a court. And they may say, you didn't do enough. And you'll be like, but I did everything they told me to do. So it's like uncertainty is really the worst part of trying to figure out how to get back to work, because you just don't know. There's no ironclad answer to any question.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The pandemic seems different now than it did in April. We were still in like the happy Tiger King, we're all in this together area. And now it's like, it's significantly changed. So I want to ask, when you're separating the state and local guidelines, and let's say a company wants to go just above and beyond to make sure that their employees are safe, what are some of the things that a company can do outside of state and local guidelines?
Okay, well, I think, first thing they can do is say, if you're remote and you want to stay remote, and that works for us, the company, and for you, the employee, then remote work is really the best way to prevent coronavirus from getting into the work. You don't show up, you're not in the office, you're not in the workplace. Trying to figure out how to go from what everyone thought was going to be a temporary move, by now, I think everyone thought, hey, we'll be back in the office. And people just aren't back in the office. So number one, if an employee can work from home and that works for the company, keep that going, figure out how to embellish that, maybe plan an in-person event, once or twice a month or something like that, just to try and keep them, in contact with the people they need to. But remote work can be your best friend in this situation. The other answers have to do with, working in separate shifts or trying to make sure. I know here in Boston, if we wanted to go to the office, only 25% of us could show up at any given time. So that's not even our whole editorial team. Our editorial team could not show up for a meeting because we're too many people for the size of our office. So some of the guidelines are so restrictive that coming back to work at this point doesn't make sense. It may make sense down the line, but not yet.
Is there anything that the individual employees can do to help make their return to work safer, do you think?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that employees can do is if you're not feeling well, don't go to work. I mean, because I'm working from home and my wife is going through new teacher orientation. She just started a new job. And so I've overheard some of the things that the HR people at her school district are telling her. And it's basically, if you're sick, if you're feeling sick at all, just don't come to work. Because
that's such a change from, I feel like, what us as Americans are used to. Because it's doesn't matter, rain or shine, sick or not, you need to show up to work, put your adult pants on and get to work. And that's completely flipped now.
Toughing it out is you could potentially close down that school for the day or that workplace for the day. If you come to work and you're positive for coronavirus, you could do a lot more damage than you could good. And that's right. You're right, Michelle. It has flipped on its head because now they're saying.
I think that's one of the hardest things for people to accept, honestly, because it's just what we're all so used to.
Right. You plow through. You take your Zyrtec or your pain reliever and off you go. And, now you could be putting your whole workplace at risk by doing that.
And I think it speaks to culture too. Like your workplace is not just about you. If you work in a culture, if your workplace has a culture where the culture is bigger than one person, it's easier to be able to say, all right, you stay home, we'll pay you for the day, you don't have to take your PTO, feel better. Mm-hmm. I feel like that speaks a lot to the type of workplace that you.
Yeah, and it's an adjustment for the employer as well, because the employer has to say, okay, we're going to have to figure out how to work without this person for today and maybe for a couple of days or maybe for 2 weeks. I mean, the employer has to figure all this stuff out too. It's a two-way street. But I think the employer has to think about there are bigger risks here than missing a day's work. They could shut down my workplace for who knows how many days. And that's something that has not been a problem in the past. So, we're dealing with that reality now. That's where we are.
I read somewhere that Google is keeping their workforce out until 2021. Do you think that's going to become standard or the normal?
I think that January is going to be sort of a point where a lot of companies are going to decide whether this work from home thing is something they should just do permanently or sort of do some sort of a hybrid model. Right now, everyone who's staying out of work is doing it out of an abundance of caution and because clearly it's not safe for everyone to return to work all at once. So I think Google and some of the tech companies have real advantages over regular companies or companies that are not technically forward-facing because they have all the tools they need in order to keep an employee viable and productive from home.
And secure.
Yeah, and secure. and secure. That's a big one. And many other companies don't have that luxury. They don't have that knowledge. They don't have that experience. They don't have the money to ramp that up. So they're trying to figure this out on the fly. So they will probably need to be returning people to work sooner than, mid 2021, because they've been sort of scraping by with this hybrid model, with this remote model. But at some point, they're going to want to bring employees back to work, because there's many workplaces where work from home isn't going to work forever.
Right. Aaron, we have really enjoyed having you join us. Will you come back and do this again with us?
Absolutely. This was fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let us know what you're working on next, and we'll schedule another show.
Yeah, we'll do we can do a release. This is Aaron's new
yes.
new article. Get it here first or whatever. I don't know that we can even do that.
And Compliance Week might not like that.
Yeah. But
I'm going to recommend that. I have a colleague who's writing a big story about Carnival. Carnival Cruises. That's going to be very interesting. It's coming out next month. So.
Oh, really? You want to send me his name? We can interview him too.
Send Michelle his information.
Her
name. There we go. That was sexist of me. Wow.
No, it's totally, So she'd be a great interview when that case study comes out. Really
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, we'd love to have her on.
And we'd love to have you back again as well. So again, it was so nice to talk to you. Thanks for sharing all your knowledge about your 100+ articles you've written about COVID. And keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was a real pleasure.
All right. Thanks, Aaron.
Have a great day.
Bye.